This story takes place in 1975. At the time, I was only 5 years old, but this event has been burned into my memory, and I don't believe I shall ever forget it. My parents and I had taken a road trip to California to see my mother's aunt and uncle who lived in Fresno. This trip crosses long stretches of Nevada desert and took place sometime in the fall. These were the days before air conditioning was standard in vehicles, so it wasn't very hot, but I do remember it being quite warm. Anyways, after our visit was over and we headed back to Salt Lake City, which is where we lived, we had taken a different route that my mom's uncle had said was faster, but we ended up getting very lost. Wandering around on Nevada's back roads, it was starting to get late. My parents had been arguing, and I can remember being very hungry. We finally came across a small town, though I'm not really sure it classified as a town. It had a motel, a gas station, a restaurant, and about a half-dozen trailer homes, so we stopped for the night. First, we checked into the motel, which only had a basement room available with 2 double beds in it. We left our suitcases and wandered over to the restaurant to eat. After dinner, my father got directions back to the main highway, and we went back to our room for the night. Let me paint the picture of this room. It had no carpeting on the floor, just concrete. The double beds were against one wall with one small window above them. I really can't remember the color scheme, but I remember the bathroom only had a toilet and a sink in it. Anyways, I remember the beds were hard as rocks and couldn't get to sleep right away, so to get comfortable, I had a habit of letting my arm hang down the side of the bed. I slept a lot on my stomach as a kid. For some reason, this made it easier to get to sleep, and I faded off. I was fast asleep when I felt something tug at my arm. We had a dog named Christy, an English setter, who sometimes would tug at my arm while I was sleeping, letting me know that she wanted to play, but on this trip we hadn't brought her along. So I mumbled to her to stop it and to let me sleep. A little while later, I felt the tug again, but a little harder this time. It was enough to wake me almost completely. I looked around and didn't see anything, then put my head back down with my arm on the side again. Moments later, this tug pulled me all the way off the bed. I landed hard on the floor and started screaming for my mom. My mom jumped up and saw what was happening. This greenish ball of mist with a sickening bright green glowing center had pulled me off the bed and had started dragging me across the floor. I can remember being held in a weird vice-like grip, but not being able to see any hands holding onto me. Moments later, this tug pulled me all the way off the bed. I landed hard on the floor and started screaming for my mom. My mom jumped up and saw what was happening. This greenish ball of mist with a sickening bright green glowing center had pulled me off the bed and had started dragging me across the floor. I can remember being held in a weird vice-like grip, but not being able to see any hands holding onto me. Well, my mom jumped out of bed and ran up behind this thing and screamed, "No!" Then she smacked it with her hand, which made contact with the thing, and you could hear a loud smacking sound. Once this thing was hit, it let go of my arm and let out a high-pitched scream like I have never heard before. It started whirling around like a funnel, then disappeared into the drain that was located in the center of the room. My dad had slept through most of this and hadn't woken up until he heard the thing scream. I ended up sleeping between my parents the rest of the night with no further incidents. Years later, I was telling this story to someone who had a great deal of experience with the paranormal and supernatural. What he told me was this: the thing I had encountered was an imp. An imp is a low-level demon that feeds upon the souls of young children. They also have the ability to take shape or form and usually appear as children to other children. Years later, I was telling this story to someone who had a great deal of experience with the paranormal and supernatural. What he told me was this: the thing I had encountered was an imp. An imp is a low-level demon that feeds upon the souls of young children. They also have the ability to take shape or form and usually appear as children to other children. He also told me that folklore and mythology have some root in fact, and that many of the old fables are still true today as they were hundreds of years ago. He also told me that I was very lucky. He also told me that folklore and mythology have some root in fact, and that many of the old fables are still true today as they were hundreds of years ago. He also told me that I was very lucky. Many a missing child have ended up in the hands of these demons and have never been found. This is my story. Many a missing child have ended up in the hands of these demons and have never been found. I've always been receptive to spirits since as long as I can remember. I also sometimes dream of them and dream of things that have happened or are going to happen, but in no way do I consider myself psychic. Here is one experience that might creep you out, and I'm curious about other people's conclusions. When I was 5 years old, my dad took my two brothers and me on a road trip shortly after he and my mom divorced. We'd often drive for long hours without stopping, touring sites, until we grew tired and stopped to camp. Since my dad wasn't exactly the richest man in the world at the time, he'd find places for us to camp where there were no camping fees. Sometimes we'd have to forego public camping sites altogether and drive down lonely dirt roads secluded from the highway. This was one such occasion. Near the base of the Beartooth Mountains, he drove his truck many miles down a dirt road, passing a ranch holding roaming buffalo within. Finally, he found the spot where he wanted to place us for the night, nestled within the pine trees. We set up camp, roasted hot dogs, and finally went to bed. I was walking through the forest. It was day. I was alone. I noticed that the trees were tall and thin and not pine trees. There wasn't any undergrowth, just the soft ground. And then I stopped. I was staring at one very large, flat rock buried beneath the dirt, only the top surface of it exposed. Noticing this, I looked up to see a tall, pale woman with long, dark hair wearing a stained white dress like a nightgown, standing several feet in front of me. She was talking, or at least I could see her mouth moving, but no sound or words came out. I asked her if she was okay, but as soon as I did, she began screaming. It was one long, drawn-out, high-pitched scream that never seemed to end. She never moved away from the rock, pointing at it. My dad woke me up. It was morning and we were already running behind. He needed to fix breakfast for us fast, so he asked me and my brothers to collect firewood to help him get started. I ran behind my brothers, who ran deeper and deeper into the forest. We ran into an area where there wasn't any underbrush. No good, because there weren't any sticks on the ground either. They ran on, but I didn't follow them. I stopped because I was in the same place as my dream the night before. I'd already seen the large, flat, moss-covered rock in front of me before. Suddenly, I realized I was alone. Terrified that the screaming woman would appear, I hightailed it out of there and returned to my dad, waiting for my brothers to return. The dream has stuck in my mind ever since. So I was an exchange student in China around the year 2000, and with a fellow buddy, I was exploring Xi'an. Our hotel was on this really big 6-lane brightly lit street, and honestly, it felt like half the people there were foreigners. At about 10 in the evening, me and my mate decided, hey, let's go out and find something to eat. At an intersection, we found this smallish shop, bought a snack, and started asking around with our super limited Chinese and English. Eventually, we found someone who spoke English. She was the niece of the shop owner. She was super young, but spoke good English, and said that she could direct us to a very good and cheap restaurant. So we agreed, and she led us just down the street and into the non-tourist part of the city. It was interesting, how the surroundings changed. After a few minutes, we were the only foreigners on the streets, and a lot of people were staring at us. The buildings became more run down, and the place wasn't as brightly lit, but it was still kind of charming. She kept talking to us, asking us questions like where we stayed, how long we were staying, what our plans were, and so on. She also mentioned a few times that she was studying and was 21 years of age. This raised a few alarms with me, but me and my mate didn't want to be rude, and honestly, we were hungry. After about 15 minutes, we arrived at this very small and, well, somewhat charming restaurant. I don't really know the proper name for these kinds of shops, but in China, at least in the cities I visited, there were a lot of shops set up in prefabricated houses. Each house had two smallish shops on the street level, and you could see all sorts of businesses in them. Some of the bigger ones would rent two adjoining shops to form a bigger store, and so on. The restaurant we went to was in one of these half-size stores. There were just 4 tables, a counter leading to the kitchen in the back, and even a video game machine. With the help of our translator, we ordered, and then she excused herself. The food was honestly super good and cheap. We both got these super large bowls of ramen, a heaping dish of different baozi dumplings, and several beverages, all for no more than 25 to 30 bucks. So far, so good, but, what made the whole situation strange were a few other factors. For one, the other guests in the restaurant looked like they were straight out of a crime flick, and they were definitely talking about us, pointing and laughing. One guy had a pretty bad knife scar on his cheek, another had a broken nose, and a third one, I'm not even kidding, was wearing an eye patch. While we ate, we noticed a lot of people gawking at us, but what especially caught our attention were these, gangers? There were 4 youngsters with matching leather jackets and short-cropped hair who patrolled the street at least 4 times while we were there, and every time they passed the shop, they looked straight at us. After we finished eating and paid, all of a sudden, our 21-year-old translator turned up again, asked if the food was good, and then offered to take us to some very good place with a lot of fun. We politely declined and thanked her, but said we were just going to head back since we were tired. She tried to fast talk us, telling us about parties, beautiful women, young girls, and all that. But when we saw those youngster gangers again, we waited about a minute and then bailed out of there. She actually followed us and seemed really frustrated, even kind of panicky that we left so suddenly, and tried her best to convince us to follow her offer, but we just got out of there as quickly as possible. In high-speed mode, we made it back to that big 6-laned main road and said our goodbye to her. That whole situation was honestly super scary. In hindsight, these were probably all just very nice and hardworking people who had just never seen foreigners in this part of the city. But those youngster gangers, the cliché pirates at the other table, and the shady way the girl tried to goad us to who knows what kind of place, while mentioning multiple times that she was 21 years old, all of this together led me to the conclusion that we just got out of there in time. I was tootling across the country, mostly driven by the quest to find pretty stuff. I'm not a hard driver, and I'm not about getting from point A to point B quickly. I like to get about 3 hours of driving in a day. If I push, I can do 5, but that's really my limit. I also don't want to drive at night. One day I was getting to my endpoint and evening was setting in soon. I stopped at a truck stop and was deciding if I should push on or sleep the night. The goal was to get to this campground with some cool rock formations in a river. I wish I could remember what it was called. It was something dreadful, and I should have taken that into consideration, but my quest for pretty stuff was winning out. I decided to push on because I would make it there just in time for sunset, and then could spend the next day relaxing there. As for the name, it was something like Murder Rock near Ambush Campground. I don't know what I was thinking. I get to the campsite, put my money in their trust deposit box, and make my way to park. It was wintertime, so there was snow on the ground, but the roads were clear. No other campers were anywhere to be seen. I park and hop out for some cool sunset photos, but don't explore too far, as it will be dark soon enough. Going back to my vehicle, I find the washroom. Oh, a flush toilet, what joy. I go in, take care of business, then look around. They have showers too. Nice. I run one to see if it works and has hot water. Suddenly I hear voices clearly outside the bathroom. He went in here. Okay, let's wait. I figure it's the camp attendant making sure I paid and whatnot. I turn off the shower head to the door and no one is there. I look in the snow, no footsteps, but there is a door to the other washroom. But I feel uneasy and decide I should head back to my vehicle. I get to it and do a quick scan for footprints around my space, only mine. Okay. I climb in and just feel so unsettled. I definitely heard voices clearly articulate words. I would like to logically say the pipes had air bubbles and they made noises. But pipe noises are not English words. Some sat there for a little and tried to relax and shake it off, but I could not. I sent some notes to friends just to get a feeler for how freaked out I should be. Everyone agreed I should be freaked out and that I was dumb to go to Murder Rock and Ambush Campground. One friend called me and talked me out of the situation. She said, "Here's what I need you to do. Can you see the driver's seat?" I said, "Yes." "Okay, do you have keys?" "Yes." "Can you get to the driver's seat with your keys?" "Yes." "Okay, with me on the phone, I want you to get into the driver's seat and start the bus." "Okay, I got it started." "Great, now put it into gear and drive out of there." I went back to the truck stop and had a nice sleep, but dang, that freaked me out so much. So glad my friend just told me to do little steps to get me off that freak out. I was driving down an old highway, one that's not really used much anymore during a snowstorm back in 2011. Had a pretty close call on this particular trip. I was heading to the next town over with my girlfriend at the time, and we were behind an SUV on the road. We were behind them for a good while when they came to a stop. I maneuvered the car around to get a good look at why they stopped. There was a truck in the road, driver and passenger doors open, and 2 sets of tracks in the snow leading off to the woods. So, I got out of the car to make sure no one was injured or needed help, but honestly, there were no signs of car trouble. There wasn't much snow built up on the inside of the car, so, the doors hadn't been left open for long, considering it was snowing pretty heavy. I started to follow the set of tracks into the woods to check, but I stopped. Before I could do much of anything else, the driver of the SUV called me over and let me know that the truck had been reported as stolen. They said highway patrol was on their way, so I went about my business. A day or so later, I found out the owner of the truck was a man who lived nearby that had been missing for over a week. The police went into the woods to look for him and found his freshly deceased body in a ditch with a single gunshot to the back of the head. Whoever took him beforehand must have marched him out there, shot him, and just wandered off into the woods. I'm still very glad I didn't follow those tracks. I didn't hear the shot, so it must have been right before we all arrived at the truck. Honestly, I don't even want to think what would have happened to me if I'd persisted.